thought I would be speaking to in describing Nate's unique contributions and his enormous influence in our field has already been covered. So I'll just make a few brief points, probably no more than 2 or 3, in trying to both situate and calibrate the remarkable research record that Nate Rosenberg compiled, keeping in mind that I and everyone else on this panel, I suspect, are really talking about only part of his research record. We're devoting essentially no attention to his also influential work in the history of economic thought. As many people, I think beginning with Dick Nelson, first thing this morning, pointed out, Nate's research really was a ground-up, inductive approach to the study of innovation and the economic history of technology that emphasized diversity among technologies and indeed diversity among sectors and institutions. And with that in mind, it's remarkable, and it involved a deep grounding in the details of individual technologies and institutions. And what is striking, I think, are several things about that. One is the sheer breadth of coverage of different topics, different technologies, different systems that Nate's research covered. We go back in the 19th century to the study expedition of the British group from the 1851 Crystal Palace exhibition, the wooden balloon frame house, the machine tools industry, the coreless steam engine, into the 20th century, the commercial aircraft industry, the chemicals industry, and the medical equipment industries. This is an enormous breadth, and in each of these areas, Nate was really working from the ground up. So I think it's both the ground up approach, but it's also the number of different areas in which he was working that I think are quite remarkable. And as I said, coming back to the point about institutional diversity, Nate also devoted a great deal of attention to the role of institutions, and in particular the role of different types of institutions engaged in the process of innovation and diffusion. We can obviously point to industrial R&D labs, research universities, academic medical research centers, each of which in many respects represents a slightly different ecology of innovation, and all of which he worked intensively on, including a good deal of field work in a leading industrial research lab at the time, Bell Labs, much of which field work underpinned his influential paper on How Exogenous is Science. And I think also this focus on institutions in many ways helped lay the groundwork for and anticipated much of the innovation systems work that has arisen in parallel with and subsequent to. Another point about Nate's span of topics and fields and subjects of study is the fact that we talk about interdisciplinary research. We talk as economists or historians in many cases about collaborating with people within our field who focus on different subspecialties. In some cases, perhaps we collaborate across fields, rarely across fields within the social sciences. Nate Rosenberg, on the other hand, was collaborating and co-authoring with medical researchers, with engineers in the form of Ralph Landau, Walter Vincenti, and Steve Klein, and medical researcher Anatine Jalines. This is remarkable in terms of, again, the breadth and the level of both intellectual security, if you will, and intellectual adventurousness that enabled him both to communicate with and to work with and synthesize, I think, a number of very important papers that involved a great deal of bilateral exchange and flow of information and knowledge. But I think with the possible exception of Dick Nelson, economists doing field work is particularly unusual and extremely rare, even nowadays within US management schools.
Nate was a very close friend of mine, and as a person, he was really full of anecdotes, a lively conversationalist, a man of extremely broad interests, as well beyond even this very varied scope of the study of machinery, of development of new products. I read his papers with great pleasure, though probably not with a deep understanding, because it came from such a different viewpoint than mine. But I always found, somehow I was reading a narrative, which seemed to be just kind of a story. At the end of it, there was more than was contained in the story. I didn't just learn about machine tools. I somehow learned about the process in a way which I couldn't reduce to a nice formula, but nevertheless, it was clear somehow you got an insight into the nature of the interactions in a way which was both concrete and general at the same time. I can't quite describe it. I can't quite understand how it happened. His influence, he lives on, of course, it is a great influence on the developing thing, which is community. The very size of it here is already kind of remarkable, considering the small number that were involved in this 40 years ago, and to which so many here have contributed. Now, of course, I'm interested in why do we have these peculiar set of institutions? We have a market. Why don't markets work? You know, now the markets don't work in a lot of cases. As soon as you get rigorously into general equilibrium theory, you find out what's wrong with it. Namely, that, for example, one of the things is you look at the number of markets that's supposed to be there and aren't there. Even something as simple as buying a commodity 3 years in advance. Well, I'm putting up a plant to produce automobiles. Obviously, what I want to do is sell the product years out. Why not? You may do that a little bit with agricultural goods and minerals, but maybe a year or two. With automobiles, you don't do it. Why not? You don't know what an automobile is going to be like in 5 years. I mean, there are other reasons, but that certainly is one of them. Why that you can't specify the automobile. So already innovation, the fact of innovation, in a way creates problems for the economy as a whole. Not only is the market for innovation a difficult one, but it creates problems for other markets.